Political analyst Javed Rana is joining us now to discuss the latest developments. Now, Joe Biden's call to end the Gaza war contrasts with the United States' unwavering support for Israel and its staunch opposition to Russian actions in Ukraine. So how do you assess the consistency of US foreign policy under the Biden administration, particularly in its advocacy for human rights and international norms?
Well, I think Americans still believe that the rest of the world, apart from Israel, they are foolish. They don't understand what is going on. I mean, they had Russian President Putin declared in last year as a war criminal from the International Criminal Court. And when the International Criminal Court proceeded, not actually declared Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister and its defense ministers as a war criminal, then they made a lot of hue and cry, and they warned them that they will face, there will be punitive actions against them by the USA. So, over the period of the time, Americans have institutionalized hypocrisy in their foreign policy. They have altogether different standards when it comes to Israel because it is their illegitimate child. They have to protect Israel at every cost, no matter if it has launched a Holocaust and a genocidal war on the Palestinian people. It doesn't matter to them that 41,000 people have been killed. It doesn't matter to them that still 10 to 11,000 people are under the rubble. It simply doesn't matter to them that 96,000 people have been either maimed, disabled. Families, generations of the families have been eliminated in Gaza. It is not something which matters. What matters to them is simple, that in the Ukraine, if the 10,000 civilians have been killed, if 13,000 civilians have been killed, they are more important. The blood of the Muslim is not important. For the West, this is the dark reality. Might is right. This is an ancient principle that is in practice everywhere in the world when it comes to the Muslims. You see, now there is a bigger picture, and the bigger picture is the fear in Washington and in Europe is that if the Donald Trump possibly comes into power in November's presidential election in the USA, that would mean that their conspiracy to basically isolate Russia, that would not be succeeded because Donald Trump has clearly announced that he wants a negotiated settlement of Ukraine-Russian war. Something which Europe doesn't want, something which the deep state in the USA doesn't want. And by deep state, I mean it's the CIA, it's a Pentagon, and more importantly, the Jewish network, the Zionist network, which is in action in Israel. And that is why we have seen one assassination attempt on presidential candidate Donald Trump. And there was another potential assassination attempt, which was, in one way or the other, was prevented by the security forces in the USA. So their stakes are quite high. And my understanding is that if there is a rigging in the election, in the US presidential elections, it may be very sophisticated. It could possibly erupt to a civil war in the USA. Because in a broader picture, Russia, of course, is looking for the electoral victory of the Donald Trump, because Russia believes that if there is a negotiated settlement, they would be able to retain the occupation of parts of Ukraine. And also, very, very, very importantly, then the Russian would be able to dictate its agenda. The Americans, the USA is no longer a superpower. It is one of the great powers along with China and Russia. And that is a bigger picture which has developed. What Americans are not understanding, that it's unconditional support, hypocritical support, based on institutionalized double standards. It has played one of the critical role to strip USA as a superpower. Because now the international public opinion has altogether changed, not only against the USA, but also other European countries which have been backing the apartheid states unconditionally. We have heard a lot of political rhetoric coming from the European countries that they don't want this war, they want a ceasefire. But at the same time, they have been supplying all kind of weapons. They have been sharing all kind of intelligence. The Americans the Americans, they have their sea assets, military assets in the Eastern Mediterranean and elsewhere in the Middle East, just to make it sure that Iran does not intervene. They have also a contingency plan whereby the Netanyahu wants to prolong this war, and the reason Iran so far has not retaliated to the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, the Hamas political bureau chief, quite simple. Iran understands that the next thing which is going to happen after they retaliated, their nuclear installations would come under attack, because the only threat right now, a meaningful threat in the Middle East for Israel is Iran. And there is a fear in Tel Aviv that Iran is at the edge of making a nuclear bomb. And if that happens, that will be a recipe for disaster for Israel. And I think that is why Iran looks like a bit reluctant, but at the same time, Netanyahu needs more and more wars, and he's looking for an opportunity where he can justify an attack on Iran. But that would be a disaster in the region. But again, we have to understand that the apartheid state of Israel is an extremist religious state which is pursuing its theological agenda, where they believe that much of the Middle East has been since anciently part of a once upon an unknown Jewish state, so they have to reoccupy the entire Middle East. But the trouble is that they don't have the population to expand. But they don't understand their own faults, that they cannot manage it, at least for the time being, and they believe that they are creating political conditions where the arrival of so-called, their quote-unquote, Messiah can be hastened and facilitated. They are pursuing a theological agenda where the unarmed, helpless Palestinians have become a horrible cost to pay. This is a bigger problem that the international community is not noticing. And what the Jewish community, Zionists, are not understanding, that because of this genocidal war, because of these sufferings of the Palestinians, there have been 400% increase in violent attacks against the Jewish community elsewhere in the world. In days to come, in weeks to come, in years to come, the apartheid state Israel would lose. They are still insecure. They don't understand that by occupying more and more territories of the Palestinians, by occupying other territories in the region, like in Lebanon, something they are intending to do probably, that means that will be more kind of a recipe for disaster. There will be more enemies for Israel. All the survivors of the Palestinians whose parents have been killed by the Israel, they will be recruited by the jihadi groups, and Israel would certainly stay under attack from the Palestinians, from the Hezbollah and other militant groups. That has been happening right from 1948, and it will keep on happening. But again, the mindset in the Tel Aviv is that they have to prevent it. They have to kill everybody who could potentially can attack them. The real problem that they don't understand, and that is their greed to occupy more and more territories. As we speak, so far, Israel has occupied at least 23 to 25 square kilometers in the occupied Western territories. Under the different agreements, this region was supposedly was supposed to have some sort of semblance of autonomy. But that autonomy is not there because it is under the occupation of Israel, and the Fatah government, the so-called Palestinian Authority, they, by and large, their inaction has led to facilitate Israel's occupation of the West Bank and worsen the situation, aggravate the situation in the occupied territories.
Okay, Javed, thank you so much for joining us. We always appreciate your contribution and insight.
The growing tide of anti-Israel sentiments. What you see behind me is just tip of the iceberg of what is happening in the country. More than half of $52 billion black CIA budget is spent on espionage network in Pakistan. How would you handle it?
The US has looked upon Pakistan as an ally at one point and then as an enemy at the same time.
That is going to be the first legal reason on the basis of which he is going to be instantly ousted by the Supreme Court of Pakistan.
Joining us live, Javed Rana, who's an expert on politics and geostrategic issues.
In the world politics, which is not being driven by any moral principle, it is being driven by the hard geostrategic realities. In a broader picture, more countries would aspire to have nuclear weapons.